If I could ask everyone to go ahead and take their seats, the show will begin. Good morning and welcome. You've now experienced a fraction of what it feels like to be at a FIRST competition. Welcome to those of you who are here in person with us at the Clara Barton Auditorium at the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. And welcome to those of you who are joining us online from across the globe. And yes, I did say the globe because this time the invitation to participate in today's speaker series has gone out globally, because it was sent to the FIRST Network, which in fact is a global network, thanks to the vision, leadership, and drive of our special guest today. Before I turn it over to our very own director, Andrei Iancu, I have a couple of quick housekeeping asks for you. The first of which is to please turn off your cell phones. I understand that the robots will be proceeding throughout the room and taking away any phones that ring during the presentation. Second, I want to ask you to prepare your questions for the Q&A portion, which will be occurring at the latter part of today's event. There are microphones in the aisles for those of you who are here present in person. We also have a very special microphone for any students wanting to ask a question. And we also have the ability for our online audience to ask questions. There will be an address posted, an email address posted later during the Q&A portion for you to use to submit your questions. But without further ado, let me turn the program over to our director, Andrei Iancu.
Great, thanks, Elizabeth. Welcome, Dean. And the way we'll do this, well, I'll have a number of questions for Dean, and then we'll turn it over to the audience. But first, let me introduce our speaker. By the way, it's really great to see. Usually, the first couple of rows are filled by USPTO executives and the like. It's really great to see that now the first couple of rows are filled by the future USPTO executives, students that have come to be with us. Obviously, our speaker today needs no introduction to this audience. He holds hundreds of U.S. and foreign patents. Dean also received the National Medal of Technology in 2000, and importantly for us here, the USPTO was inducted into the National Inventors Hall of Fame in 2005. In the 70s, while he was still a college student, he invented the auto-syringe, an automatic infusion pump that delivers precise doses of medication. And obviously, About a couple of decades later, he invented what he probably is most famous for. I don't know, I'll have him tell us, the Segway, in the mid-1990s. In between, he founded Deca Research and Development Corporation to pursue inventions aimed at improving lives around the world. One of Deca's most ambitious projects nowadays is water purification, a device called a slingshot, named after the weapon used to defeat the biblical Goliath. And he'll tell us a lot about that as well. I think the goal is to reach millions of people who die from waterborne disease each year. So the breadth of innovation is absolutely staggering. But really, one of the most exciting things in my mind about Dean's career is his incredible focus on education. And we see that firsthand in the room today. He founded FIRST, which stands for Inspiration and Recognition of Science and Technology, in 1989 to achieve his educational goals. To date, millions of students have experienced this program, and a number of them are with us here today. And that is so really great to see. First and foremost, I want to thank what I believe are 5 FIRST LEGO League and FIRST Robotics teams which have joined us today to showcase their efforts. Many of them have traveled for quite a distance on the East Coast. So we have, I believe, PowerHawks Robotics team. Yes? Life Engineering team. The Wizards.exe team. The Ruling Robot Falcons team. And last but certainly not least, the magically energized Lightning Waffle Bunnies. That's quite the name. I also believe that Nick Reeves is here, right? Nick, are you here? Yes, all right, there he is. Nick grew up in FIRST, participating both in junior high and high school, and is a testament to the power of FIRST. Nick today has a degree in computer science and engineering, works at Stillwell Technologies and Robotics in Virginia, and received his first patent in December of 2019 for a robotics interface. Yay! And most importantly, really, Nick continues his legacy with FIRST and is now a mentor and a volunteer, which I am sure that when you all grow up, you will also do the same. Welcome to all of you, and welcome also to St. Andrew's Episcopal School, neighborhood school here in Potomac, Maryland. Welcome to all. And not to forget the patent attorneys, obviously represented first and foremost by Dean's own patent attorney, Maureen Tui, who's here, and she was also a member of the PTO's PPAC. Welcome to her, and also to David Rogers of Deca Research. And, of course, to the USPTO examiners who do the day in and day out the work that is needed to promote innovation and entrepreneurship in the United States. So, with that, welcome, Dean. So, because we already met some of the FIRST robotics students, why don't you tell us a little bit about this what I view as one of your most important projects, FIRST?
First of all, thank you. And I do agree that it's the most important project I've ever done. People always say, what's your best invention? Meaning inventions are important, right? And my answer is always, well, if inventions are that important, the best thing you can invent is more inventors. And we now have 1 million of them. So I think long after I am no longer current with the best technologies, no longer capable of making some individual great idea happen, I will know that there's a generation now, a few generations, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of kids out there that one day are going to be sitting here or getting the National Medal of Technology or getting a Nobel Prize, and somebody's going to put a microphone in their face and say, "What made you do this, professor?" Well, when I was a kid, I didn't appreciate how exciting science and technology was. I didn't realize you could create new solutions to problems until I got involved with FIRST. And from that day forward, that's why I'm here today. And I think FIRST will have the longest legacy of anything I've ever done.
That is so great to hear, and I absolutely agree. You know, back to the country's, one of the country's most famous inventors, Thomas Edison. One of the things they say about Thomas Edison, who's had, you know, probably 1,000 patents here in the U.S. alone, that his biggest invention was he invented
The
innovation
process,
itself,
yeah,
the
the
process of invention.
innovation, yep.
And that has had an unbelievable legacy throughout American history. So what is FIRST doing now? What's the latest and greatest with FIRST?
So we've started a couple of new programs, and you've already listed a few of them. And we have a global program, which Dorothy pointed out. And we've started to do two things to make the game more attractive to more young people, because we started realizing that some people, when you say the word robotics or science or mathematics or engineering, "Oh, that's not for me." And you'll hear a lot of kids, particularly girls, will say, "Oh, science, I don't like science." And then you'll say, "Well, you mean you don't like Star Wars?" "Well, that's not science." "No, it's science fiction." And then I tell everybody, you know, there's only one difference between science and science fiction: timing. In every generation, we have science fiction, and then people get down and turn it into reality. And I'm thinking, what's more exciting? Thinking about it or actually making it real? So over the years, I've always wanted to show kids that say they don't like science that they really do if it's presented properly, because science fiction has been part of culture forever. And I'm really happy, and in fact, I have a video that I'll ask them to show in a second, that for the first time this year, as I said, over the last few years, we started theming the games. Instead of just saying you're getting points by picking those things up, no, they represent pollution in the ocean, and when you pick them up, you're cleaning up. And whatever game we make, you still have to learn all the business of engineering and mechanics and electronics and sensors and robots. But instead of just saying it's about winning points like in basketball, no, you're thematically demonstrating how these skill sets will allow you to tackle the world's problems. So this year, since our theme is about space, we got a little company called Disney, who owns a little brand. And by the way, thank you, Trademark Office. We're going to talk about that, I hope, too. But you know, patents expire, but trademarks go forever. And they're very valuable. And so we convinced the Disney company not only to let us work with them and co-brand with them because they have such a great reach to kids, but one of their most special properties, Star Wars. And so this year, for the first time at our kickoff, R2-D2 and Mark Hamill, Luke Skywalker, were there to show that Disney, one of the greatest, let's say, companies that can distribute science fiction, is working with us to create real science. So look at this intro that we just used at our kickoff. Can we show that?
At face value, FIRST is a robot competition, but at the end of the day, it's so much more than that.
I'm very excited to announce that Disney and Lucasfilm are teaming up with FIRST as part of the Star Wars Force for Change philanthropic initiative.
My favorite thing about FIRST is my students are learning how to work together, they're learning how to be leaders, and also to express themselves.
Welcome to FIRST Championships! May the Force be with you!
Star Wars has always been a leader in the latest technological developments. Now with the Disney Imagineers bringing Star Wars to life with Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, this is a really exciting year for the saga. This year, Star Wars Force for Change is working specifically with FIRST to inspire their youth community to use their technology and robotic skills to be forces for good. Together, we'll bring hands-on learning opportunities and mentorship to more young people around the world.
That shows you that FIRST is really come around. Now one of the world's most iconic giant entertainment companies, known for their ability to present science and science fiction, Disney, is our partner.
And you're also doing something commercially, right, with another big company that folks would recognize.
So all of you at first know that you trust that baby you made, that robot, to go to one company that delivers it to every regional, every championship, and they've been doing it for decades for us, and they do it as their commitment to first, and that's FedEx. You all give them your robots, right? You trust them. Last year, they delivered thousands and thousands of them to all our events. Not a single one was late or lost or damaged. So the founder of FedEx came to me and said, Dean, everybody wants to make delivery bots, small ones that can live in a city, that can go in the suburbs, that can go through puddles, that can recognize traffic lights, that can climb stairs. Can you help us make a bot like that? Mr. Smith, you know we would do anything for you. The whole FIRST community loves you. But by the way, Mr. Smith, I've spent 20 years building a balancing device that's made for sidewalks and climbing stairs. It helps the disabled population. It's called my iBot, from which came the Segway. But I said to him, if we pull the seat off that thing, because they can carry a 300-pound human payload up and down stairs. It can certainly carry a pizza. So I said, let's put a cargo pod on it, and it'll have not only the immediate advantage to get bots out to you quickly that are made for a community, and it'll also help drive the volume of the bases up so we can make iBots more available, more cost effectively to the whole disabled community, including veterans. He's very passionate about that. So last year, I put a whole team together at DECA to do what you guys do. We made a project out of making a delivery bot, and just recently, they announced it to the world by making a quick little 1-minute video that shows it doing all the things I just said, recognizing the environment, moving autonomously, climbing stairs. They even put music in it. He needs me, because they wanted to show that bots in a community shouldn't be things people are afraid of. They should be part of it. So it's a very cute thing, but I figured all of you guys that build robots would appreciate how hard this was to do. So let's look at the piece that FedEx did.
And all at once I knew at once, I knew he needed me. Until the day I die, I won't know why, I knew he needed me. It could be fantasy, oh, or maybe it's because he needs me, he needs me, he needs me, he needs me, he needs me. La da 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 ba da 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 da.
The future, what we deliver by delivering.
We're expecting all of you guys to deliver a future, so keep working.
I noticed that they were delivering something more important than a pizza in that video. But I have a very important question about the pizza delivery you mentioned. When the bot comes with the pizza, do I have to tip the bot? Have you worked on that? I mean, we need to know these things.
We've actually thought about those kinds of issues, and I can't disclose them. They're still trade secrets.
Okay. All right, let's step back in your own career, because at some point you were the age of these children, and as I mentioned in my intro, one of your first inventions was when you were a college student. But when exactly did you figure out that you were an inventor? When did you start tinkering around with new things?
So when I was in actually junior high school, I started making things in my parents' basement. And I have to be careful because I love getting an education and I love teachers that help me. But when I point out to people I didn't do well in school, they think that's dissing school, and it's not. It was just dissing the way they do things that are a little too abstract for me, and they go too quickly. And I used to like to really think about a problem from every angle and then go build something. And one of the reasons I started FIRST is I thought there were lots of kids out there that may not be the best at being students that are good at getting a quick answer to the question, checking it in the back of the book. I thought all the interesting questions are the ones that don't have an answer yet in the back of the book. If there's an answer there, why waste your time? Not only that, I thought they aren't even asking the most interesting questions in the first place. So I started trying to do things on my own, at my own pace. And then I had an older brother who's a brilliant, unlike myself, he always got all A's and he was a very good, fast reader, and I wasn't. But anyway, he went off, show you how smart he was. He's getting his MD degree and his PhD, and he's going to be on the faculty at Yale Medical School and graduate school, and he's running up and back to Harvard, another little local school in Boston. And he's come up with new ways to treat babies with cancer. His specialty is pediatric cancer. He's a special guy. But he'd come home on the weekends and say, these babies weigh 2 or 3 pounds. They're too small. I can't use all the equipment to give them the drugs. Nothing does it well. So I go down in the basement and build him a little device to help deliver super small amounts of drug, very precisely from little syringes instead of big IV bags. Now, that was not a business, because brothers don't pay you anything. But I didn't do it to be a business. I did it because my brother needed it, and I did it because these babies needed it. But my brother was very proud of it, so he started showing it to all of his professors at Harvard and at Yale. And one of them at Yale said, wow, we could use this little thing you made for those babies. So somebody could put it in their pocket and get doses of a drug like insulin for diabetes all day long. Well, unlike my brother's work, which is research on a very rare disease, sadly, diabetes is a very common disease, and we realized millions of people might need these things. So I moved out of the basement, created a company, and started making insulin pumps for the world. And from that, started making lots of other medical equipment, and have never stopped. I now have about 800 engineers, and we work on lots of different medical products, primarily ones that we think will make a big improvement in the quality of life for people if we can make it happen. And almost every one of the projects I start on, people say, "You're gonna do what?" That's crazy. And by the way, if people don't think it's crazy, it's probably not a big enough idea.
Yeah.
I only work on the ideas when people say, "You're nuts." Sadly, most of the time they're right. And you have to learn how to fail with a little class and a little dignity, and projects can fail. Don't let the people fail. But every once in a while, it works. And then you get a patent. And then you go to big companies and say, look, here it is, and it's protected. And if you now take it to scale, this could help millions of people live a better life. And you launch it, and it goes from indefensible to indispensable the first time people say that's a way better solution to a problem. And I've been doing that now for nearly 40 years.
But most inventors are focused on a particular area of technology and keep coming up sometimes with great inventions in a particular area. You go from the auto syringe for tiny little babies to the Segway. Hard to imagine things that are more different technologically speaking. Maybe I'm wrong, but and many things in between. How do you go from a medical device to a robot on the streets? How does that happen?
So over the years, more and more people have said to me, sort of a version of that question, why do you do so many different kinds of projects? And the first time I heard that question, I didn't understand the question, because I said, I don't do different kinds of projects. All the projects I do are kind of related. Well, what do you mean? Well, I try to look at the world and try to find big problems that if I can be part of a solution will have a big impact. You know, making a little consumer product a little better or 2 cents cheaper or 3%, that doesn't interest me. There's lots of big companies that are very good at incremental change. So if there's a really big problem out there that hasn't been solved, I think we should think about it. And, you know, whether it's delivering drugs to babies that might die without it, or allowing a paraplegic or a quadriplegic to stand up and go upstairs and balance, which was the iBot, from which the Segway was just a fun sideshow. But making an iBot we did because we said that's a big problem for a small group of people, but a big problem. And it's a kind of problem that I don't think anybody's going to solve, because the wheelchair companies aren't going to make super sophisticated fly-by-wire systems. So it was a big problem. that would have a big impact if it worked. It's one that I doubt other people are working on, and therefore we should figure out how to do it. First, same thing. We know lots of people do science fairs, lots of schools are doing that, but no. Look at the problem differently and say, we don't have an education problem. My mom's a teacher. I know everybody here knows some great teacher. Why does this country 30 years ago think we have an education? No, we have a culture problem. Kids don't see how much fun science and engineering is. They all think bouncing a ball is fun because it's a sport, but science and engineering aren't a sport. I'll make it a sport. So I thought that's a new and different idea. It could solve a really big problem, change the culture of this country to create a better future for us and the world. So the long answer to your question is, I think all the projects I work on are very similar, whether it's tiny little drug delivery systems, big drug delivery systems. Now we're doing a clinical trial in home dialysis, whether it's iBots, whether it's FIRST. I look at important, big problems that I think we have a totally different approach to, that if we don't do it, it probably won't happen soon. If we do it and it works, we can make a really big impact on a really big problem. And if it meets those criteria, it's a big need, we have a unique idea, and we might be able to solve it by looking at it differently and coming up with a better technology. Then we start on it. Sometimes we fail. I don't show those to the world. We only show you the ones that work. And
you said so many things. I want to come back to a bunch of them. But on this last point, by the way, I do think that it's also good to show the failures because others learn and avoid similar mistakes. In academic circles, that's an issue because there's an incentive for professors to publish only successful results, so then everybody else has to reinvent the wheel. But going back to something important.
But just on that one, I'll tell you, I violently agree with you. In fact, I think the reason a lot of people don't ever make big successes is because in school and in academic, they're taught not to fail. When you think about what school really is, it's a way to learn from the past how to do what we know how to do. They show you the answer. That's how you do it. It's in the back of the book. If they don't know the answer, they typically don't publish the question. So we at DECA have created part of our culture is what we call frog kissing. And we give awards to our engineers. You kissed a frog. You didn't get a prince or a princess out of it. You got a wart. Most of the time you kiss a frog. It doesn't turn into much. But we have frog kissing. And we recognize our engineers that try to do really big things in a way that nobody ever did them before. And most of the time it's a surprise outcome. And the surprise isn't a happy one. But instead of punishing failure or hiding failure, we celebrate it because we learn from it and we move forward. And I tell everybody, at the end of the day, if I had a choice between a really big success and a really big failure, I like the really big success. Yeah. But if I had a choice between either one of those and the warm death of mediocrity, I'd choose the failure. I'd choose a great big failure, maybe then one day a great big success, before I would go the safe route.
Yeah, so the common saying is it's better to have tried and failed than not to have tried at all. Huge point for all major inventors, embracing failure, not being afraid of failure. Everybody who comes and speaks at this, in this series makes the same point. But isn't this a cultural problem in the United States? How, I mean, you're doing it with FIRST. I love this frog kissing concept. But what do we do in the United States? Because people are ingrained to fear failure. It's almost like a stigma. Instead of being proud of failure, look, I've tried. I should be proud of that. What can we do as a country to make a bigger impact and change that culture so people are happy to try and fail?
Simple answer. It's one word. FIRST. Some of you people, and probably I won't embarrass you if your team or your coach ever said it, but we get rookie teams every year. You have 80,000 schools. Invariably, at least one team, that's always it's a rookie, will call after they get their kit from FIRST. And they'll say, there's all sorts of neat stuff in that kit, but we looked all through the bottom. It's missing. What's it missing? We didn't get the assembly instructions. And I say to them, here's the biggest thing about FIRST. There is no right answer. There is no wrong answer. The part that's not in the kit is your imagination. We don't supply that. You do. And you just got to take that stuff we give you and come up with what you think is a solution that's going to be more different and maybe more imaginative, maybe more creative than all the other people. But when you get to the event, you'll be astounded how different all these things look, even though they started with the same stuff, because the stuff is fixed. Imagination is unbounded. And I tell all the kids again, look, when you go to this competition, this year 80,000, there's going to be about 77,997 robots that lose, because there's only 3 robots on the winning alliance, right? But if almost every robot loses, but every kid comes out a winner, we're set. And I think one of the strong repeated messages we give at FIRST is there's nothing wrong with trying something new, which probably will fail, as long as you learn from it and move on. In fact, I'd say the major difference between project-based learning and what you do in the classroom is in the classroom, and it's great. They give you a powerful shortcut to what is the right answer, because if you had to start from the beginning, we still call it Archimedes' principle. Archimedes died 2,000 years ago. It was true then, it's true now. What textbooks are fantastic at is organizing all the stuff that all the genius that came before us, Galileo and Newton and Einstein, we can learn from what their lifetime of effort was. So we have their tools. We don't have to start from scratch. But once you have the tools, what's the point of having tools if you don't build something? And so I believe that school is there to teach you how to not fail at the stuff other people spent their life first failing at and then showing us how. Here's the right answer. Here's Newton's laws. Don't think that things naturally come to rest. They don't. Trust Newton. But once you learn everything that other people can give you to avoid their failures, you got to make your own failures to make progress.
Going back to the diversity of your invention, I don't want to shortchange that at all, because it is quite unique. And I think there's a powerful lesson in that. It seems to me that when you first made the syringe, you were not an expert at syringe making. When you made the Segway, I suspect you were not an expert at Segways. But nevertheless, despite that, you're not afraid somehow, and it seems like it's unique, but it's a powerful lesson. Maybe you can talk a bit about that. You're not afraid to venture into areas where maybe you don't have the background and the expertise. You're still doing it. In fact, now you're working on human tissue and organs, right? Okay, so what's that about? What can we all learn from that?
I think one of the things we should all remember is sometimes expertise is your biggest problem. Because once you've learned how to do something a certain way and it sort of works, you're very reluctant to change. You might incrementally improve it a little, or a little, or a little. But where big breakthroughs come is when somebody that isn't biased by what the current methodology is starts from scratch. Because today we have so much better technology, whether it's material science or motors or energy or batteries or you name it, like in the world of now we're trying to manufacture replacement human organs. Well, if I went to a biology class, if you went to a medical school, you'd see the hood and the petri dish and people doing incremental work. But if you've spent your life looking at factories that make 4 billion transistors at a time now on a single chip, there's about 4 billion cells in a pancreas that you'd need if you have diabetes and your pancreas doesn't work. Why can't we make as many cells as we make little switches? The mentality of the engineering world and the semiconductor industry is very different than the laboratories that haven't changed much in the way they look since Madame Curie was there. So my background is more physics than mathematics. I've got about 800 engineers, but I like to look at every problem by going back to first principles, like the water machine. How does nature make water pure? It boils it, sends it into the clouds, and they don't use filters and osmosis membranes. I fly a lot. I've been in those clouds. I never saw osmosis membrane up there. And rainwater, I said, okay, why can't we use the energy of the sun to make pure water? That was an issue of thermodynamics and physics, not engineering. I'm not a water treatment company. We're not a company that does biological development, but I think one of our big advantages, we don't start with a bias that this is the way the world does it now, how can we change it a little? We say, given all the technology that's available today that might not have been available when people came up with what is now the state of the art, how would you do it if you got to do it all over again? And even first, as you said, I'm not only not an expert, I have no background in education. I'm not a teacher. I love my teachers. My mom's a teacher. But I said, let's not assume that's the problem. We know kids are passionate about certain things, sports and entertainment. How can we bring the passion of sports and entertainment to developing the muscle hanging between their ears? Oh, well, that's what FIRST is. I don't think FIRST is an incremental change over a science fair. I don't think the light bulb was an incremental improvement over the candle. I think candle makers made them better and better throughout their company's history, or they'd go away. But when somebody brought the world of electricity to light, they didn't make an incremental improvement on the candle. So I would tell you, I not only go into different fields that we have no background in, I like to go into a field where we had no background, and instead of trying to incrementally fix the existing solutions, I like to go back to what is the basic problem here? Whether it's getting kids to love math and science, or giving people clean water, or allowing a paraplegic to stand up. To me, it's go back to what is the basic problem and what's a new way to look at it. Typically, companies take their own product, and if you ask them, what's the basic problem with my water filtering machine? The filters don't last too long. Or they're not really addressing the fundamental problem. They're addressing the problem that is associated with their typical solution. And maybe their typical basic solution is outdated. You know, a typewriter company would say a big improvement would be to use the ball. And well, a company that understands modern electronics would say, I don't want any moving parts. I'll make a text editor and I'll put it on a screen. So you have to, you know, again, the electronic calculator is not an improvement on an adding machine. And the adding machine companies wouldn't come up with a calculator. So don't assume that because you don't have history with the problem, you can't come up with a better solution. It's still, as Einstein said, imagination is more important than knowledge. And sometimes knowledge is what gives you boundary conditions. Get rid of those boundaries.
Okay, great. So we're going to start taking questions from the audience. We have 2 microphones on the side. You can line up on the left or the right. And where's Elizabeth with her cube? In case somebody wants a cube to speak into, she can bring it to you. Raise your hands. While you guys get going and line up, let me ask Dean one more question, but start going to the mics because we'll get going very quickly. How important, so you have over 100 US patents and hundreds of international patents. We even made a card for you, so there's a Dean Kamen card, trading card. I think you all have it on your chairs. How important is intellectual property protection when it comes to innovation?
It's not only important, it's probably the most important. And I have to tell you, first of all, I have to do a shout out. I got to thank the examiners because I watched over the last decade or two people that don't understand the value of intellectual property and patents, including a lot of our elected officials. I testified at some of their hearings as they were doing patent reform. And I realized, whether you agree or disagree with a lot of political leaders, they seem to know and understand most big issues, you know, whether it's taxes or defense or, you know, they live with that stuff, healthcare. But when it comes to intellectual property, most of them have never had to deal with it. They don't even understand what a patent really means. They think intellectual property somehow isn't like real property. And I have to tell you, so much misinformation has been put out about what patents are. I've had senators and congressmen say, well, aren't your patents, you know, you're going to get royalties. You're going to make products more expensive. Sure, I will. You see, I sit and I work on how can I make a product tomorrow that's not as good as the ones that are out there today that I will charge more money for. I'm pretty sure the marketplace will take care of that problem. So you say to people, if you're going to invent something, if you're going to put time and effort and energy into inventing it and then spend a lot of money developing it, it better be so much better than what's out there today that when you ask a big company to spend their money developing it and putting it out there, they not only can make a better product, either higher performance or lower cost because of your technology, which you protected, that they can do all of that and still give you a little royalty. Because if you can't make products better and in the end more cost effective, whether you get a patent on it or not, it's useless. But one after another, I would realize that people don't understand what a patent really represents. Again, everybody, they were undermining the patent fundamental idea that you own your intellectual property. And I was talking to smart people saying, you know, you have a deed to your house. You got a deed. By the way, if you didn't own that lot, would you go spend hundreds of thousands of dollars building a house on it? If somebody could come by and say, oh, yeah, we checked. We don't think your deed's any good. We're taking it away. You couldn't have an organized society unless you had certainty about what that deed represents, ownership. But realistically, first of all, who gave man the right to say, I own this property? It was here before us. There were people on this continent before we had a country. Why do we have the right to say that we own something? And besides, even having a deed, I would explain to them, your real property, that doesn't create wealth. You have a deed, he has some money. You give him the deed, he gives you the money. There's no more wealth in the world. It was just a transaction. There was one piece of property and a pile of money before that transaction. There's now one piece of property and a pile of money. Nothing new was created. Now, you say, I know how to cure cancer. I've written it down. I spent my life doing it. It's a new idea. It didn't exist before. And he says, I have a way to build a clean engine that doesn't pollute. He knows how to do that, and he protected it. You each have a good idea. Now, you each agree to exchange those good ideas, and now each of you has two ideas. In a world where humans have the capacity to solve problems by creating new ideas, the more smart people we have, the faster the world's going to have more wealth in it, because everybody's creating new ideas. It's not a zero-sum game. They share their ideas with each other, and now 5 people have each 5 new ideas, 5 solutions to human problems. That's great. If we had just the world of not intellectual property that we could protect and value, but physical property, well, every time there's another person alive, there's a little less physical property for each of us to share. So real property is a zero-sum game, and worse, we're using up the oil, we're filling up the land. But intellectual property is unbounded. The more smart people we have creating more good ideas, the more wealth there'll be in the world, if you can protect them so that you can share them. Nobody's going to build their house unless they trusted the system by which their deed says they own that. Nobody is going to invest in anything unless there's certainty about it. And unless we make sure that the general public understands the importance of the United States Patent Office, it's the only place I know that helps you create wealth. They create intellectual property. I mean, come on, people. Every other piece of government, we need them, but, you know, they tax you. They take away your money. They spend your money. They move your money around. Fine, need to do all of that. But they better have an engine that allows you to create the money in the first place, to create the solutions to problems in the first place. They better have some piece of government that incentivizes you to take risks. I mean, I think it was President Lincoln that said that the Patent Office adds the fuel of interest to the fire of genius. You have to add fuel to people to ask them to risk their time and their energy and their money and failing, their reputation. You have to give people a reason to believe that once I've spent my whole life creating this thing, you can't just take it away. And that's what the Patent Office does.
Great, thank you for that. And the examiners here doing this work day in and day out, I'm sure really appreciate that. There really is a sense of mission here. The PTO is a result of those principles. Okay, let's go to a question, ma'am.
Good morning to you. As a mentor, my kids are the ones who brought me to FIRST. What I'd like to know is, who was the most influential person that assisted you in creating and meeting those goals that you set for yourself?
So you might be surprised by this because I'd say my dad, but my dad, anybody knows my history, was an artist, a cartoonist. Now, he did a lot of science fiction type cartoons in the early days. But the reason and by the way, he created our logo for us. My mom, a teacher, also helped me get first going. But the reason I'd say it's my dad is he was a self-employed guy that created things from whole cloth. He started out in the morning with a brush and a canvas, and at the end of the day, he created something. And it had to be good enough that people would pay him for it. Otherwise, he couldn't feed his family. So in a weird way, he was my role model. He's a guy that worked at creating things. He essentially was independent. He never worked for a big company. And I grew up watching him do something he loved, and he did it every day. And the only advice my father ever gave me as a kid was make sure you find something that you love to do, that you can get so good at doing it that you can make a living at it, and then you'll be living your dream. Your hobby and your work will be the same thing. When I went out to start first, both my mom and dad, as most people would say, you're going to do what? You're going to make a sport out of engineering? You're going to make it more exciting than football and basketball? Oh, yeah, I am. And unlike those other sports, I can appeal to kids that aren't going to be 7 feet tall or aren't going to be 300 pounds. And it doesn't matter, boys, girls. I will make the only ultimate sport in which all kids can be on a varsity team. And by the way, it's the only sport where every kid can turn pro. There aren't millions of jobs out there in the NBA, the NFL, or in Hollywood, but every company I know, every tech company I know is desperately looking for more smart people. And these people around that say, oh, technology is going to eliminate jobs. Where's their head buried? Everybody I know is looking to do more technology. And yes, we're going to create robots that'll eliminate some jobs. It'll eliminate the boring, mindless, back-breaking, dangerous jobs. It'll create new, exciting opportunities and careers to give the world more and better technology. But trust me, nobody's going to slow down the pace of technology. So whether they win that debate or not, because people don't understand that technology does not eliminate jobs, whether they continue to have that silly debate or not, one thing you ought to know, nobody's going to slow down the pace of technology. So you have a choice. You can be on that bus or you can be under it. That's your only choice.
All right, we'll alternate, but he was there first. Yeah, man.
Hi. Okay, there we go. Do you in your company, do you make the products the inventions that you come up with yourself, or do you ally with other companies to create them?
I love that question. I wish you were in the Senate and the Congress when they were defining something back then that they called patent trolls. Now, I have to tell you, anything that has value to it, anything that has value, bad people will try to take advantage of it. You know, people counterfeit money because money is valuable. And there are people that have tried to abuse the patent system, and they should be stopped. But we do not stop people from taking advantage of counterfeiting money by closing the treasury and saying, no, we just won't have money anymore. That'll stop those that'd be nuts. Well, they sort of tried to do that with patents. And I was introduced at one of those hearings, and somebody said, well, Mr. Kamen, these patent trolls never make their products. All they do is get a patent and then prevent other people. And we call them trolls. So I was introduced at that meeting, and I said, hi, I'm a troll. And everybody kind of laughed. And I said, you need to understand I spent the first 10 years of my life not only designing and developing things, but then putting them in production. And then figuring out how to get them out there and get them to global markets and hiring people in different continents to represent my products. And if you only have a small number of products, that's very expensive. It takes time. It's going to take longer for people that desperately need your medical solutions to get it. It's going to cost them more because you're a small company. So I said to all these folks, now I've realized that by teaming up with big companies that are really good at global reach, really good at high volume manufacturing, really good at supporting products, we can make it a win-win-win. I can get better and better at doing what I like to do up front, conceive the idea, develop the idea, build the prototype, maybe build enough of them to get through a clinical trial, but then hand it over to these big guys because they can scale it more quickly and get them to the people they need it more effectively. So I win, I do what I do well and get better at it with my group of now 800 people. The big companies do well because they're very good at some things, but innovation maybe not so much. They're tied to a model, as I said before. And the third win is the public. So a long answer to your question is we always make the stuff because if you can't make it, how do you know it really worked? And how do you make improvements? And how do you show people that are skeptical about, yeah, I can make a balancing thing to take a disabled person up the stairs, or I can make stuff that's toxic stuff and you drink it. So yes, we build everything. That's why I have 800 engineers. But I specifically work hard at finding the most efficient way to get my stuff to the people that need it. And again, the only reason I can do it that way is because when I walk into some big company with something that works, the most valuable thing I slide across the table is, I have a patent. If I'm going to ask you to invest hundreds of millions of dollars to build a factory and make these, you got to know that if you spend all your money doing this, somebody else can't take it away from you. So yes, we build everything. After we get a patent, we then take it to big companies and ask them to help give it to the world in the most efficient way possible.
Great. Ma'am?
First of all, thank you so much for bringing FIRST, which is such a wonderful, holistic program that has pretty much changed the lives of so many kids around the world. Thank you so much. And I'm a proud FLL mom. I'm a proud FLL coach. And my son, from kindergarten, now he's in college. He's been through the FLL journey in FTC. And now my daughter, who's in elementary school, is part of FLL. And this brings me so much joy to see here and meet with you today. And throughout my coaching years, what I've seen is FLL is such a holistic program. It's not just about robotics. It's about teaching kids how to research. It's about teaching kids what core values are. And these are lifetime skills. As our director alluded to, you're teaching the kids and equipping them how to research so they can go and research on pretty much any field that they want to. And you're teaching them how to respect each other and how to be gracious professionals. And that's pretty much the foundation of FLL. So I was always curious and I wanted to find out, why is FLL not part of the main school curriculum? Why is FIRST not being part of elementary school so thousands of kids can take advantage of this program?
So I am working really hard to make sure FIRST is available to every kid in every school in this country. And I spend every minute of my waking hours that I'm not at my day job, which mostly is an organization that helps me fund my fantasies, like getting clean water to the world or getting every kid to have the option to be involved in FIRST. I'm working at it, but I need this army of supporters that we have. I'm hoping that the United States Patent Office, with all of its people that desperately need the next generation of inventors and who I believe share our conviction that innovation is critical to an improved future. But I love the fact that you said it's not just about robots. I love the fact you said it's about self-respect. Everything you just said, I have one more little video that you need to see because, and as Elizabeth said when she opened this thing up, it's not just the US, it's global. So a couple of years ago, even though we had never tried to go international, at the championship where I had 50,000 people at the Astrodome, we had 81 different countries had at least one team there. But people said to me, that's not good enough, Dean. We need to officially make it like the Olympics. We want every country in the world to send a team. So I started a second little not-for-profit only a couple of years ago called FIRST Global. And I put a little video together to send to all the people we knew around the world, whether it's government leaders, industry leaders, university leaders, parents, to get them to each join FIRST Global so that we would start FIRST teams all over the world. Now, I realized that if I send something out to different cultures and different places around the world, unless you're a geek, unless you're already an engineer or a mathematician, you'd be intimidated because our culture somehow makes kids think, oh yeah, we're all going to be great at football or basketball or something. But oh no, math, it's hard and it's not beautiful, it's not fun. So I realized I needed a piece that made it clear to everybody that it's about all the things you said. It's not about robots. I went to New York and I went to a guy that's famous for doing powerful image presentation of big ideas, the famous ads like Apple does. And I spent 90 minutes saying to him, it's not about robots, John, it's never been about robots, I gave him your speech. He said, I need in 2 minutes or less to show the world why they gotta be involved. Not what first is, but why first is. And the guy puts down his pen and he says, Dean, I've done stuff for you for years, but telling people why is way harder than telling them what. And by the way, Dean, you keep saying, he was reading his notes, you keep saying it's not about robots, I go to every one of your events in New York, it's all about robots. John, I'll get you some of those famous voices from Hollywood to help us. I was getting desperate. He puts down his pen, he said, Dean, I know what you need, and I don't need a big, booming, famous voice. I need a 7-year-old girl. And he made a 2-minute video for me to tell the world why every serious parent, political leader, corporate leader, leader of the United States Patent and Trademark Office ought to be involved. And by the way, thanks for the trademark side too, because first is something we're protecting, that brand and that name. But he made a 2-minute video, and if you want to know how well it worked, a few months ago, in the middle of the Middle East, a part of the world known for its people don't get along well, we had a first global challenge. 191 countries sent teams there. Every country in the Middle East had a team. Every country from Africa had a team. And it was a celebration that you just couldn't believe. But look at this 2-minute video and you'll see what I'm trying to get into every school in the United States and why.
This isn't a robot. It very well may have hydraulic arms, a drivetrain, and a circuit board, but this isn't a robot. This is a lesson in humility, hard work, and collaboration. This is a CrossFit workout for the muscle upstairs. This is an apple for the next generation of Newtons. It's a lot of things, but this isn't a robot. This isn't a robot. It's a machine to build the people who will change the world.
Thank you.
All right, so we have time for one more question, and then we have to wrap it up. So that's okay, up to you.
That was gracious professionalism right there.
I'm glad you think so, Dr. Kamen. Dr. Kamen, how long did it take for you to develop your first patented invention?
Forever? At least it seems that way when you're in those dark moments and things aren't working. But I worked on, I think the first patent I have, they can put one more slide up, you'll see the lobby of my building in New Hampshire. When you come into my building, there's a lobby. It's smaller than this room, but the back wall of it is under the DECA sign. It just has the patent drawings of many. There it is. And if they zoom in the upper corner on that thing, I don't think they can do that here. It's the infusion pump that I made for my brother, patent number 3858581. And it's in this building as well. I worked on that for probably a year and a half before I had one that I would trust to deliver drugs to a baby. We got the patent on it just before we showed it to the world. I had learned that if you mess up and show something before you patent it, you can't patent it anymore. So that took probably a year and a half. I've got some projects that we've been working on for 5 years that still aren't public yet, that we're still investing in, that we're still making inventions for, and we're filing patents. We have now, Maureen in our little group has something like 14 full-time patent agents, paralegals, patent attorneys, and we have thousands of patents. Because again, my whole business, what keeps my lights on, what pays my 800 people, is the value we create by being able to give these protected ideas to our partners. So I'd say on average, it's a couple of years.
Well, thank you. Okay, we could keep on forever, but let me close with one final question about the future. So looking forward, let's say to 2050 or maybe 2100, what will the world of human technology look like, if you can summarize your vision in just a few sentences, and are you optimistic?
I'm extremely optimistic. I think, it's funny that you say optimistic. There are two kinds of people in the world: the pessimists that love to look backwards and remember with rose-colored glasses what they used to think was great in a world where most diseases couldn't be treated. And most people didn't take for granted that they have every fact that they want carrying around with them in real time, instant. I mean, all the pessimists I know that are always telling me why there'll be no jobs and there's all, none of them would really want to go back to the way life was. So I think pessimists are always looking backward, naively, with a partial memory. Optimists are always looking forward. And yes, there are a lot of problems, but to an optimist or to the pessimist, every one of these things is a problem. To an optimist, every problem is an opportunity. And I think at an accelerating pace, whether it's artificial intelligence, whether it's machine learning and machine vision, the ability of humans to get better at solving bigger problems and making more solutions, more available to a world which will have billions of people, is going to accelerate the pace of progress. My biggest concern is that we will not, as a country, be in the leading role of creating those solutions, and I'm not naive. I think there are bad people in the world. There are people that will take powerful technologies and use it as a weapon against other people, whether it's a military weapon or an economic weapon or a social weapon. And then there are people that will use advanced technologies as a tool. And I think first is creating the people that not only will have those tools, but they, based on their relationship with mentors and moms, and they will not only have the technology tools to create a better future, they'll have the vision and the courage to do it in the right way. So I think in 2050, the number of problems that scare us today, fear of cancer, fear of running out of clean water or clean air, I think the things that we all are worried about today will be solved. It's the things we're not yet worried about, that we're not even smart enough to know about, that will be the problems that are facing kids in an even more sophisticated environment in 2050. So those kids better have an even more sophisticated capacity to embrace technology, to be comfortable with change, to be comfortable with failure, and to move on in a cooperation that's global. And I believe first, by 2050, will be intrinsically part of the culture of this country, and I hope of the world. And it's going to make life more exciting.
So I fully agree with you. It's critically important for the United States that we expand innovation and the opportunities to invent and to come up with new things demographically, geographically, across the country for so many reasons. And it's hard to think about somebody in the United States who is doing more work to make that happen than our guest, Dean Kamen. Thank you very, very much, Dean, for being here. It's truly an inspiration. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.